the industry, and moving from a declarative perspective to a data-driven regulatory. So let's start with an overview about a telecom regulatory oversight. Actually, in most of the country, there are 3 to 4 telecom operator, one regulator that is in charge of regulating the industry. Every operator has submitted by the past a bid to get the license, and they signed to be compliant about some requirement. Mostly they get engaged to provide a good quality of services for the customer. They get engaged to protect the subscriber from fraud. They get also engaged into identifying subscriber and devices and so on. They are also engaged to be compliant with the regulation and the law, especially for taxes. And they are also providing a part of their benefits to a regulator as a regulatory fees. So those are some perspective that regulatory actually need to check if operators are comply with these requirements. And most of the time in most of the country, these are declarative summarized report that operator provide every month or every quarter to telecom operator. There are also engagement. So operator are engaged in their lessons to provide a good quality of service, to monitor the quality of service and handle issues, addressing customer complaint also, and provide the best services in all the country to avoid service disparities, for example, and provide equitable access to digital services. So this is behind developing a good digital economy. So the idea actually how telecom operator can gain access to data from telecom operator and check if telecom operator are compliant with all these requirements that they got engaged at initially when they signed for their bid. So that's the idea, and the main challenge for the regulator is how to be data driven today and start checking in real time what is happening on each telecom operator. So the general framework can be divided into 4 stages. So first, telecom regulator need to build a data collection process. They need to collect all the data that are generated from the network, which are basically around subscriber. So they need to have a standardized processes to collect all the data from different sources, whatever the vendor behind, the data need to be collected and processed and provide the insight that are needed. Telecom regulator, they need to invest more in advanced analytic capabilities. That means they need to invest more on big data analytical tools. They need to invest on training their resources to scale them to be able to explore and profit from the huge amount of data that telecom network provide. They need also to have a kind of collaboration between all the stakeholders. I mean, telecom regulator is not a police that need to make sanction to the telecom operator. The telecom operator are private investor. They are here to get money, but the telecom regulator, they should make sure that there is a fair competition, that citizen subscriber profit more from a good network, good quality. So they need to be a mutual collaboration. They need to share inside and work together. The idea is provide better quality of service, and which is good for the health of the digital economy. The last part, which is very important, is to provide the necessary framework for data security and privacy. Data coming from telecom network are very sensitive, and it hold all the record that are related directly to citizen and subscriber, and at the national wide, it's very sensitive and it should be secured. Exactly, should be secured. Telecom operator are already engaged in their bid initially to make sure that these data are secured. So when telecom regulator also collect this data, they need to be aligned with the same policy, and they need to make sure that this data are very secured and processed in a way to make sure that it keep the privacy for each citizen. So now let's get inside and check deeply what are the data that telecom regulator can collect from a telecom network. And let's start by an overview of the beginning of the life cycle of a subscriber. So usually a citizen will buy a SIM card and will buy a device, and then put in the SIM card into the device and start using the network. So the life cycle start initially that telecom operator, they need to purchase some resources, especially numbering resources from the telecom regulator. And then they will use these resources to produce SIM cards. So SIM cards are usually in their inventory. Each SIM card will be characterized by a phone number, which is the MSESDN, and let's say a physical ID that identify the SIM on the network, which is the IMSI. And then there is a link between the MSESDN and the IMSI in a network element called the HLR. So HLR is the registry of subscriber with their authorized services. So SIM cards are distributed into the countrywide using distribution network like distributor, sub-distributor, retailer, agent, and so on. So when the customer wants a SIM card, there is a first processes that need to be started, which is very important, the KYC, the Know Your Customer. So customer, they need to provide an ID to make sure that this customer has purchased this SIM card. When this process has been done, then the subscriber can start using the SIM card, and it's usually activated using the first call or the first internet session or the first SMS. So from there, a life cycle of the SIM card will start officially, and every transaction the customer will do with the SIM card, the network will generate some events with what we call CDR. It's a record, it's a log that is generated somewhere which contain all the information about the event. So when the SIM card also is activated, they usually operator provides some free resources like some free minutes, some free SMS, and some free megabyte to start using internet. Subscriber can also start doing top up, and from the top up they can start purchase their bundle if they need to use the network. They can also enable their mobile money account, and from there they can start do transaction and so on. So from that level, SIM card is activated, inserted into a device, and start using the network. So whenever they start using the network, mobility, SMS, voice, data, anything, there are records that are generated by the network. In some other country, there are a law enforcement agency that they enforce the operator to also have a device registry. They need to identify each device, what is the subscriber behind, which is usually what we call the EAR equipment, which is installed on the network. So when the KYC process has been done, at the same time, we can also register the device and whitelist it so that this device can start using the network on a specific telecom operator, or it can be for all the telecom operator nationwide. This process also enable telecom operator and regulator to manage different use cases like device stolen, authentic device. They can run cross-checking and whitelist or graylist some devices. So this is a part of the KYC process in some country. We need to identify the SIM card and the device at the same time. And if the device is not authorized, it will not work. In some country also, they enforce that process also for roaming, especially for visitor. They come from outside the country. When they get inside the country, they need to register their devices, sometimes at the airport, and from there they can start using their devices in a roaming situation. So anyway, at the time device and SIM card are allowed or authorized to use the network, they will start generating the data. So let's see, in a network, there are a lot of network elements, like for example, devices are connected when they are powered on, they are connected to the nearest tower. And each tower or a subgroup of tower aggregate their traffic into another network element, which is the BSC or ANC for the 3G. And they are connected with the soft switch, the MSA. They are connected with the VLR for the HLR to make sure that subscribers are authorized, that are authenticated first, then authorized to do uh, a transaction. And then it's connected to what we call the charging system, which is the main equipment that do the online charging, that can manage the subscriber account, refill, the charge the voice, SMS, data in local or in roaming, and so on. Operators are also in a national wide or at the international level. They are interconnected between them through sometimes a direct connection between operator through their MSC, but they can go through a national or international gateway for transiting call to the national or to the international. And when they are interconnected, there are some fees for interconnection. So the same for the data, for the packet switching level, 2G, 3G, 4G. There are some network elements like SGSN, JGSN that generate all the record related to internet session, even in GPRS or EMTS or 4G. And every time a transaction is done, there is a record. For example, in SGSN, JGSN, we have the MSESDN of the subscriber, we have the MZ, we have the EMEA of the device that has been used, we have the timestamp where the session started, the timestamp where the session has ended, the volume of the data that has been uploaded, downloaded, and so on. And also we have also the location of the subscriber. That means we have the ID of the cell where the device was attached inside a specific tower. The operator also, they enable let's say, mobility when subscriber move from a tower to another tower. So we have information. We know how subscriber uh, are moving from one tower to tower. And all these data are very important. Of course, these data are very sensitive, but it's very important for law enforcement agency, for telecom regulator, or for other national agency to study the behavior of the network of the citizen, how they are moving around the city. It's very interesting in some situation of natural catastrophic. We know how citizens are moving into the the country. So a summary of the data that are generated. So whenever a SIM card is inserted into a phone, we have the information. We know that this SIM card with this number, with this specific device has been located at this tower. When the subscriber refill, we know we have the information, we have the amount, we have the timestamp, we have the location, we have the channel that has been used. That means that if they use a voucher, if they use an agent, if they have used mobile money to refill their accounts, so all this information we have, how much money they refill into their account. And when they start using this money, especially in voice, SMS, and data, we have the information. So we have the color, we have the colored, we have the timestamp, we have the duration, we have the volume, and we have all the balances that has been debited, credited when an event. So we can, telecom regulator can compute, for example, precisely how much revenue operator generate for voice, SMS, data in local country or outside of the country in a situation of roaming. We can also get information like voice, how much minute to the national operator, to the on-net network, to the international network. So we can get insight by subscriber, by every destination. Same for any incoming call, any incoming SMS, we can get information from where the call, from where the SMS come into the country, and how much money, how much revenue it generate for the telecom operator, even directly by charging the subscriber, or indirectly by charging the carrier that send the event, especially in interconnection level. But also we have the information that even if subscribers are outside of the country and they are in situation of roaming abroad and they use the network of another telecom operator, there are data that are exchanged between telecom operator that hold the information how operators are charging each other, so we can know how much money operator they earn from roaming, especially when roamer get into the country. We have also information when subscriber use the USSD channel, especially in mobile money, or accessing to the portal of the operator to refill, to transfer, for example, credit to other subscriber, to subscribe to specific services like uh, like uh, masking the number, or waiting call, or multiple conversation at the same time, enabling some services like SOS credit, SOS data, and so on. Also, when a device, for example, is not allowed to access to the network, so OER, for example, generates some log when we see clearly that this device is not allowed to access to the network. And when the device is whitelisted, we have the information also. We have information from OCS, like, for example, when customer purchase bundle, when customer transfer credit between them, when customer lose credit because credit has been expired, has been not used, we have the information so we can know precisely what each customer do with the money they deposit into the operator. So all this information, telecom regulator need to access this information. I think in many countries, the law are already there to make sure that telecom regulator, law enforcement agency are allowed to access, collect, and process this data, of course, respecting the security policies and privacy and so on. So all what telecom regulator need is to invest in maybe in the technology behind to process all this data, in the scales behind to make sure that data can be processed, analyzed, and insight can be extracted. So now let's talk about what are the method actually, or in the future, that telecom regulator can use to start collecting this data. So there are many methods. Some of them are recommended, some of them have some requirement and so on. So we will check, for example. So some actually there are let's say telecom operator, they provide regular report. See, they already have the system, the data warehouse behind, the process behind to collect and process and analyze and extract the reports. They have already, for example, business intelligence reports, tools. So some country telecom regulator access directly to telecom operator reporting tools. They get access to a specific view and they can extract directly what kind of report they want and so on. Sometimes telecom operator, they send every quarterly summarized report directly to the regulator, or sometimes also regulator, they provide a portal where every operator need to upload some specific canvas of report where they share some insight about the revenue, the number of active subscribers, number of minutes for voice, SMS data, KPI for quality of services, and so on. Sometimes telecom regulator runs some on-site audit. So they come randomly, for example, and get 1 week of data and start to process it to get some KPI and then generalize for a large specific period to check what the operator has been already shared. Sometimes also regulator, they can deploy directly some probes on the network and start getting the data, especially for voice, SMS, and internet access. So they can install probe, and probe will generate CDR, and regulator will collect this data and start analyzing it. And so in many countries, we see actually probe are deployed and the regulator getting insight from this probe. But probe will not provide the whole data operator they need, for example. So they can also opt for a direct data feeds. That means all the data that already operator generate in their network element, they can send a raw copy to the regulator, and regulator should deploy behind the big data tools to collect, extract, and process this data. And they can provide exactly the same data that probe get from the network, but they can also access to some other data, especially the charging data, where can they get insight about the revenue, the top up, and so on. They can also collect mobile money data, which is something that probe cannot collect. So a direct data feed and the network probe are one of the best practices that are recommended, but they need more investment in terms of tools and skills to be at a certain level to be able to process a huge amount of the data and get the insight that we need. So that's a big picture of the methods that are actually telecom regulator can use to start collecting, processing, and getting insight from network operator. So now let's discuss quickly some use cases. What usually we do with this data. What are the use cases that are mostly so this is just a brief about the best practices and the framework that we need to put in place. There are 4 stages. The first stage is make sure that there is a standardization way because most of the time telecom operator they do not have the same vendor, the same data format, the same way of charging subscriber. So each vendor have its specific. So we need to come up with a standardized way where the data need to be processed and mapped to a unified schema, for example, whatever the system behind, so that whenever a new operator come or an existing operator changes infrastructure, the process at the telecom regulator side should not be changed. They should continue using the same report, the same insight that are already generated. So standardization is very important. The second best practice is because of its a huge amount of data, we need to be really able to monitor the infrastructure, monitor all the process in real time to make sure that there is no issue, there is no data integrity, and we make sure that the data is collected in a continuous way to avoid issue. And whenever there is an issue, we need to respond it quickly to make sure that the system is up to date and we can have the right insight at the right time. Third block, which is very important, is the data privacy and the security. We need to make sure that the data we have collected has been transferred in a secure way, that it cannot be leaked. And then when it's stored, it's encrypted and so on, so that to make sure that no one can access to this data and abuse of this data. And also when user inside the telecom regulator access this data, we need to make sure that they access to get inside, they get summarized insight and so on, so that we need to make sure that they are not spying subscriber, they are not seeing specific transaction. So we need to put guideline to make sure that privacy of subscriber is respected. And the last block is really the collaboration with mostly between telecom regulator and telecom operator. They need to talk every time. Whenever there is a specific trend in the data, they need to get into the same table and discuss what is happening. The idea, as I say in the beginning, telecom regulators should not be a police that all the time they need to sanction the operator. Operator are private investor. They are here to make money, but regulator is here to make sure that they are making money fairly. There is a competition for the good of subscriber. So that's the idea. They need to collaborate every time. The idea is provide the best services with the best price for the customer. So that's the target. Okay, some of the use cases. Usually regulator are here to make sure that telecom operator comply with the regulations. So that's why Regulix is a RegTech company. The idea here is how to help telecom regulator to become more data driven and check the compliance of each telecom operator. So there is a first compliance level at the revenue. So how to make sure that operator declare exactly what they make as a revenue to be transparent. If telecom regulator access to the data of charging system, understand the way charging system work, they can get exactly the real revenue that operator generate, and all they need is to compare what telecom operator declare every month, every quarter, or every year. So revenue assurance is one of the best use cases where we can use charging data. Another part is telecom operator are engaged on a specific KPI for the quality of service. They need to provide a certain level of quality of services. They need to make sure that they cover a huge percentage of the territory. So with data coming from the switches, from the OSS system, we can get access continuously into KPI of network performance. So we can check in real time if operator comply with the regulation, if they respect the threshold for quality of service. What is more important also, we can check these KPI at the national level. So we can see that there is a region where the quality of services is very good, but in a specific region, we can see that some KPI are very poor. So, and from there, we can alert the operator and get into a discussion and understand why in a specific region the quality is poor. Also, telecom operator, they need to protect their customer. That's why a KYC process is very important. They identify subscriber, they identify the device, they have a registry, customer and devices. So they need to protect customer against fraud, especially bypass fraud. It can be SIM boxes where traffic coming from international into subscriber, but using local number. It can also a kind what we call CLI spoofing. That means that the transiting carrier or the carrier itself nationally can manipulate the CLI and change them in a way to say, okay, it's not an international call, it's just a national call. And other scenario of fraud, like 1GIRI, for example, when customer are receiving a ring call and they call back, but they are overcharged and so on. So there are many scenario of fraud that telecom operators should protect their customer from this scenario. And getting all this data into telecom regulator data center, they can run the same process and make sure that there is no fraud. And then, okay, telecom operator are complying in terms of protecting their customers. So those are briefly, some kind of the use cases that the telecom regulator can explore and start getting insight into the network and transform their regulation model from a declarative model into a data-driven model, which is very important. So here I come to the end. So feel free if you have any question, even if you use the chat, or you can take the chance and get on the mic and start talking. So we are here feel free to ask question. We are here to discuss and try to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Yassine, so much for your
Okay.
insightful presentation. And as you said, you are welcome to share your questions with us.
Uh, we will also be sharing with you the presentation, the recording of the webinar, and all the resources we have been used to produce this presentation, like specific article, ebooks. So we'll be sharing with you all the resources so that you can at any time review them and get more insight. We are also available through email later if you see, if you have any specific question, if you have any specific use cases, and you want to discuss more deeply, we are available also.
Hello, Yassine.
Hello?
Yes, Mohammed is there. Mohammed is talking. I'm really thankful for this deep and such instructive webinar, and it's really helpful. But my question is, yes, these systems are like I would say mandatory. It's not. It can't be optional for regulators, for our country's regulators. But the thing is, that money, our systems usually are money driven. Okay, so that's why I have a question for you. How can you have a rough idea of what can be based on your recommendations, what usually can be the budget and the timing implementation of such system? Around what have you seen from your experience around what can be the budget? Just rough in a rough idea, please.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mohammed, for your question. The question is interesting, yeah. It's not easy to get a precise idea, but I can give some guideline. The budget will generally depend on the country, on the number of the operator, on the scope of the data that need to be collected, on the use cases that are behind, the retention also for the data to be stored. So a country with 2-3 million subscriber, 2-3 operator is not the same for a country with 50 million subscriber, 4 operators. So it vary from a country to a country. Again, collecting all the scope of data from the CS, PS, charging, OSS. It's a huge amount of the data. So it's depend on the use case. So if we are in a use case where the requirement is checking the compliance for the quality of services, all we need is to collect only the data from OSS. which is mostly aggregated data. So it doesn't require a lot of requirement in terms of connectivity with operator, a lot of requirement in terms of sales. So even we don't need to have specific equipment on the operator side. We can have small equipment in the regulatory side, and the operator can push the data, and from there, telecom regulator can start processing this data. So it's not something that require a lot of requirement. But getting, for example, into uh, deep use cases like collecting all the charging data, evaluating exactly the revenue, and store this data for a long period of retention, maybe 1 year, 2 year, record by record. It can require more advanced architecture, like putting equipment on each operator, building data link with each operator, building a data center on the regulatory side, and so on. Again, large use cases require also that the regulator have the skills behind to manage such a system, understand the variety of the data that are coming from each charging system. So it will depend really with the use case, the country, the number of operator, number of subscriber, and so on. So it's hard to give a precise answer. What we can do, if you think that you have a specific use cases for a specific country, we can get into another session and maybe discuss deeply, and we can provide a rough budget for that. Hope that it answer your question, Mohammed.
Yeah, I got your point. So yeah, definitely this should go through a pre-sales step first. You need some clear requirement gathering sessions and such. Yeah, I was hoping that you have a baseline, so kind of for from your experience. So for a specific country, you don't not you're not maybe allowed to tell the name. There was such number of operators, such number of million of customers and so. But no, it's fine. So we can, yes, sure, we can go deeply on that in another session, and yeah, discuss and find out what we can have. No problem. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hi, Yasin.
Hi. Hi, how
Good
are
evening.
you?
Yeah, I'm good. I have a question. So I understand that you shared that telecom data is very vast. So how do you convince the telecom operators to share the data that is required? Like there are issues of confidentiality and all that. So we've actually experienced some reluctance from the stakeholder share the information that we require. So we want to know your experience in this.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah. Usually it's the first question a telecom regulator start asking on any data-driven initiative, how I can access. We know that the data is there on telecom operator now, how we can access this data. So from our experience in many countries, the regulation is there when the operator sign for the license. and start exploiting the license and providing services, they are engaged to provide any data a telecom regulator require. And one of these data is accessing to network record, CDR, and so on. There is a question that privacy, telecom operator are engaged to protect this data, to make sure that this data, depending on the country, that the data is retained minimally for the last 5 years in some countries, for the last 10 years for some countries. So the data is there. Operator make sure that this data is secure. They are engaged to make it secure. Now, telecom regulator is a part of the government, so it's like I'm having how to say, I'm allowing you to access to the country, invest, and collect data from my citizen. And as a government, I'm collecting data from my citizen, and I'm the government. I'm protecting my citizen, but I'm protecting also investor. So getting access to the data operator hold from the regulatory perspective is not an issue because it's the government behind. They are engaged to protect citizen and investor. So in many countries, we didn't see this issue, especially accessing to the telecom data like CDR, like charging and so on. But in what we see as an issue is mostly when telecom regulator want access to data of mobile money. And here some issue start rising because sometimes financial services are not regulated directly by the telecom regulatory, is regulated by the central bank. And in some region, there is a central bank that cover a region of 15 country, and it's not easy to go and ask as a telecom regulator this data. But again, it's financial services are accessing or using telecom customers and telecom channel to provide these services, which belong to the telecom regulatory body to regulate this channel. And again, in each country, the central bank depends to the financial ministry, which is a government ministry. So, and in many countries, we started seeing a kind of co-regulation. So, a co-regulation between the financial ministry and the telecom regulator. And in 2 or 3 use cases we have implemented, we see that telecom regulator has been mandated by the financial ministry to collect and process this data and to provide insight to the central bank and to financial government institution to provide insight as a technical authority that have experience and so on. So that's the kind of issue we have seen sharing mobile money data, but sharing telecom record, CDR from voice, SMS, charging, I think it will not be an issue. I hope is it clear, or so feel free if you have any comment on my response.
Yes, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. I see a question in chat from Azizul Omar. So it say, out of the various methods for operators to report data to telecom regulator that you listed earlier, which method have proven to be the best and easiest way for operator to comply to reporting requirement? Okay, so here again, let's say it depends on the context of the country. So in some country, we see that there is a trust relationship between operators and regulators. And regulators are very happy just with the data summarized that they are shared every quarter. There is no need to go and collect the data and start monitoring operators. Even for quality of services, we have seen many countries that they don't require to collect OSS data and do continuous monitoring. They run some benchmark using drive test every 3 months, every 6 months, and there are a good relationship between regulator, operator. They communicate on every issue, and so there is no issue to fix. But in other country, we see that let's say that we want to make sure, for example, if you see, for example, that we know that telecom operator make a lot of money, so the idea is, okay, we know that you make a lot of money, but we need you to make sure that you invest more in providing good quality of services. Okay, so how to make sure that operator will invest, will satisfy the quality of services, will put more coverage around all the country. From here, some regulator, they start to say, okay, we need a more transparency. We think that we are not declaring exactly the revenue that you are making. You are not declaring the real KPI of the field, because we feel that the quality of service is not good. So we will run our benchmarking. We want to collect OSS data. We want to do continuous monitoring to make sure that you comply with the regulation. And here, the best practices is to go and get the data and analyze it deeply. And the best practice is get the raw data and analyze it yourself in a continuous way. In that way, operator will know that they are monitored in a continuous way. They will make sure that they are more transparent. Aziz, I hope this answer your question. So feel free if you have any comment.
No, so far that was good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? If there is no other question, we will be wrapping up. Salwa?
I think, yes, we can wrap up our webinar. Thank you, Yasin, for this insightful session. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, for sharing your questions with us. As I said at the start of this webinar, we're going to be sharing the recording with you today or tomorrow. So can you please just share your emails, send me an email, so I can send you the recording to the correct address email. I'm gonna share with you, I'm gonna leave the email address at the chat box, so you can send me your emails. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you in another webinar.